Jaya Mahavan. Kalindiya Mula Jaya Jaya Mahavan. Kalindiya Mula Jaya Jaya Mahavan. Keshigata Bamsi Bhatta Dwada Sakala. Jaha Sabalila Koilo Shinandanana. Jaha Sabalila Koilo Shinandanana. Shinandaya Soda Jaya Jaya Gopaga. Shridamani Jaya Jaya Denu Vatsaga. Shridamani Jaya Jaya Denu Vatsaga. Jaya Vrishabhanu Jaya Kirtida Sundari. Jaya Pulamasi Jaya Abhiranagari. Jaya Pulamasi Jaya Abhiranagari. Jaya Jaya Gopishwara Vrindavanamai. Jaya Jaya Gopishwara Vrindavanamai. Jaya Jaya Krishna Sakal Madhudvijara. Jaya Rama Gata Jaya Rohini Nanda. Jaya Vrindavana Jata Basi. Jaya Vrindavana Basi Jata Jaya. Jaya Jaya Vrindavana Basi Jata Jaya. Jaya Dvija Patni Jaya Naga Kanyaga. Bhakti Teja Hara Paila Govindakara. Shirasa Mandala Jaya Jaya Radhaksha. Jaya Shirasa Mandala Jaya Jaya Rasasha. Jaya Jaya Rasa Lila Sarva Manoram. Jaya Jaya Rasa Lila Sarva Manoram. Jaya Jaya Jvala Rasa Sarva Rasa Sa. Harakiya Bhave Jaha Bhajate Pracha. Harakiya Bhave Jaha Bhajate Pracha. Shijanava Padma Padma Kodira Smaran Shijanava Padma Shijanava Pada Padma Kodira Smaran Dina Krishna Dase Kohi Namasa Kirtan Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Jaya Radhe Jaya Krishna Jaya Vrindavan Shri Govinda Gopinath Madana Mohan Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare Tagore Guru Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nastaprayesu Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Tamasloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Om Agnyati Mirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chaksusum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manubhishta Sapitam yena bhutani swayam rupakadamayam dadati swapadantikam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Śrīmad Bhagavad Gita Granth Raj ki jai, Bolo Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki jai, Shri Radha Madhava ki jai. Śrīmad Bhagavad Gita Granth Raj ki jai. So tonight we're going to continue in the Krishna book. And we are in the chapter entitled, Lord Krishna returns to the city of Hastinapura. So, after Krishna had Jarasandha killed, then he liberated the 20,800 kings that were being held captive by him. And these kings were not just from India, they were from all over the world. And then he heard them speak very, very wonderfully, glorifying the Lord, begging for his mercy. These are kings, and they said, the time element is so strong that no one can escape its influence. Therefore, we have received the reactions of our atrocious activities. And we are now bereft of all opulences and stand before you like street beggars. We consider our position your causeless, unalloyed mercy upon us, because we can now understand that we were falsely proud, and that our material opulences could be withdrawn from us within a second by your will. By your causeless mercy only, we are now able to think of your lotus feet. This is our greatest gain. Dear Lord, everyone knows that the body is a breeding ground of diseases. Now we are aged, and instead of being proud of our bodily strength, we are getting weaker day by day. We are no longer interested in sense gratification or the false happiness derived through the material body. Well, that is a very deep realization. We are no longer interested in sense gratification or false happiness derived through the material body. Well, this is Krishna's instructions. If we go to the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it says here, Fifth chapter, 10th verse. Brahmanyadaya karamani sangam tyakva karotiya lipyate na sapapena padmapatram ivambasa. One who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful action, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. Padmapatram ivambasa. Padmapatram, a lotus leaf, iva like, ambasa by the water. So one who is Krishna conscious is untouched by the reactions of activity in this world. So it says in the Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, 3rd verse, Mama Yonir Mahad Brahma, which indicates that everything in the material world is a manifestation of Brahman, or Supreme Spirit, or Supreme Spiritual Energy coming from Krishna. And Brahman is not different than Krishna. And although the effects are differently manifested, they are non-different from the cause. In the Isha Upanishad it is said that everything is related to the Supreme Brahman, or Krishna, thus everything belongs to him only. One who knows perfectly well that everything belongs to Krishna, that he is the proprietor of everything, and that therefore everything is engaged in the service of the Lord, or should be engaged in the service of the Lord, naturally has nothing to do with the results of his activities, whether virtuous or sinful. Even one's material body, being a gift of the Lord for carrying out a particular type of action, can be engaged in Krishna consciousness. It is then beyond contamination by sinful reactions, exactly as the lotus leaf, though remaining in the water, is not wet. The Lord also says in the Gita, Mai sarvani karmani sannyasya, resign all works unto me, Krishna. The conclusion is that a person without Krishna consciousness acts according to the concept of the material body and senses. But a person in Krishna consciousness acts according to the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna, and therefore should be engaged in the service of Krishna. Wow, now this is a very important verse. 5th chapter, 10th verse. This verse explains what Krishna consciousness is. And it's very parallel to what the kings who were conquered by Jarasandha and then liberated by Krishna is saying. Now if we look at 14.3, it says, the total material energy, total material substance called Brahman, is the source of birth, and it is that Brahman that I impregnate, making possible the births of all living beings, O son of Bharata. Now, there's an interesting point here. Brahman can have different meanings. It doesn't only mean the effulgence coming from the body of Krishna. It has, according to the context, it can mean the Brahman or the effulgence coming from Krishna. It can mean the total material energy. Or it can mean the absolute truth, which is Krishna. This is explained in the 13th chapter, text number 3. Where it says at the 1, 2, 3, 4, at the bottom of the 4th chapter, 4th paragraph, it says 13:3. It says, there are 3 Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities. And the jiva, individual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he's the factual controller. So there are 3 Brahman conceptions. Prakriti, or the material nature, is Brahman as the field of activities. And the jiva, or the individual soul, is also Brahman, and he is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them, Prakriti and jiva, is also Brahman, but he's the factual controller. So, when you're reading Bhagavad Gita, we have to understand the position of Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer of nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the 3 in their different capacities. This material world, which is the field of activities, is nature. And the enjoyer of nature is the living entity, and above them both is the supreme controller, the personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic language, in the Svatasvatara Upanishad 112, Bhokta Bhogyam Preritaram chamatva sarvam proktam trividam Brahman etat. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and the jiva, or the individual soul, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he's the factual controller. In this chapter, it will also be explained that out of the two knowers, meaning the jiva, the individual soul, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is fallible and the other is infallible. One is superior and the other is subordinate. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly, I am the knower of the field of activity. So this is referring to Mayavadis, impersonalists. They think that the two knowers, the jiva and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, are one and the same. One who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies, and there are different owners of the bodies. Because each individual soul has individual capacity for lording over material nature, there are different bodies. But the Supreme also is present in them as the controller. The word cha is significant, for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan. Krishna is the super soul present in each and every body, apart from the individual soul. And Krishna explicitly says here that the super soul is the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoyer. Okay, so there are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti, the material nature, is the field of activity. The jiva, the individual soul, is one of the knowers in the body, and the super soul, or Krishna, is the supreme knower and the controller of both the jiva and the material nature. So therefore, we read the word Brahman. Okay. In the Ishopanishad, now we're back on 5th chapter, verse number 10. In the Ishopanishad, it is said that everything is related to the Supreme Brahman, or Krishna, and thus everything belongs to him only. One who knows perfectly well that everything belongs to Krishna, that he is the proprietor of everything, and that, therefore, everything is engaged in the service of the Lord, naturally has nothing to do with the results of his activities, whether virtuous or sinful. Even one's material body, being a gift of the Lord for carrying out a particular type of action, can be engaged in Krishna consciousness. It is then beyond contamination by sinful reactions, exactly as the lotus leaf, though remaining in the water, is not wet. The Lord also says in the Gita 3:30, Mai sarvani karamani sannyasya, resign all works unto me, Krishna. The conclusion is that a person without Krishna consciousness acts according to the concept of the material body and senses. But a person in Krishna consciousness acts according to the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and should therefore be engaged in the service of Krishna. So, that Bhagavad Gita 14.3 says, Mama Yunir Mahad Brahman. It indicates that everything in the material world is a manifestation of Brahman. And although the effects are differently manifested, they are non-different from the cause. So everything in the material world is a manifestation of Brahman. So therefore it says there are three conceptions of Brahman. One is the material nature, Prakriti. Two is the living entity. And three is the super soul. In this verse, 14.3, it's referring to the total material energy as Brahman. So, if we read carefully this 14th chapter, it says that 13:20 says, 13:20 says, material nature and the living entities should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. So the changes that we go through in this life, changing our body and so many things, and the influence of the modes of material nature are products of the material nature. So, in the purport, in the second paragraph, it says, both material nature and a living entity are eternal. That is to say that they existed before the creation. The material manifestation is from the energy of the Supreme Lord, and so also are the living entities. But the living entities are of the superior energy. Both the living entities and the material nature existed before this cosmos was manifested. Material nature was absorbed in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Mahavishnu, and when it was required, he was manifested by the agency of Mahatattva. Similarly, the living entities are also in him, and because they are conditioned, they are averse to serving the Supreme Lord. Thus, they are not allowed to enter into the spiritual sky. But with the coming forth of material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter into the spiritual world. That is the mystery of this material creation. In other words, it's a chance for the conditioned living entities, us, to purify ourselves from the influence of the modes of material nature and misconceptions we have and go back to Godhead. That's why we're here. Other people think, oh no, we're here to make more money and live in bigger houses and drive nice cars and so forth. That's not why we're here. Oh, you might enjoy those things, or you might be blessed with, let's put it like this, you might be blessed with those things, but that's not the goal of life. The goal of life is to use this life to prepare ourselves to go back to Godhead. It's a chance to do that. This is the mystery of this material creation. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within material nature. It really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. Now, this is an important question. Sometimes people get stuck on the idea that I got to understand exactly what happened. Why did someone do this injustice to me? Well, you could die long before you understand exactly what happened. It's just like being caught in the middle of a forest fire, and you sit down and say, I'm not leaving until I figure out how this forest fire started. Well, you're going to be dead before you figure it out. Instead of wasting your time trying to figure that out because you're already in the forest fire, just use all your energy and your mental acuity to get out of it as quick as possible. Then you have plenty of time to understand. But most people say, no, I got to understand how this happened. And before they ever understand, they're completely defeated by the material nature. There are some things we'll never understand. But we can, rather, instead of trying to understand something that we might never understand, let's focus on getting out of the influence of the material nature. All that knowledge is available. The practice is available. If you want to understand, the general explanation is we rebelled against Krishna. Well, that's obvious, because every day we're rebelling against Krishna, every minute of our life. So whatever happened originally, we're reproducing right now. But that recalcitrant mentality has to be adjusted, purified, changed. And we have a chance to do it. We'll use all our energies to do that, instead of trying to figure out exactly when it happened, how it happened, when, why, where, who, what. No, you'll never figure it all out. There's some things you'll never figure out. But generally, you know what it is. We rebelled against Krishna. But we're seeing ourselves rebel against Krishna every minute. So whatever happened originally is happening right now. It's the same thing. So let's fix that rebellious nature. But with the coming forth of the material nature, these living entities are again given a chance to act in the material world and prepare themselves to enter into the spiritual world. That is the mystery of this material creation. Actually, the living entity is originally the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but due to his rebellious nature, he is conditioned within material nature. It really does not matter how these living entities or superior entities of the Supreme Lord have come in contact with material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead knows, however, how and why this actually took place. In the scriptures, the Lord says that those attracted by this material nature are undergoing a hard struggle for existence. We should know it with certainty from the descriptions of these few verses that all transformations and influences of material nature by the three modes are also productions of material nature. All transformations of variety in respect to living entities are due to the body. As far as spirit is concerned, living entities are all the same. Yeah, I mean, some person has good luck, some person has bad luck. Some person is born beautiful, some person is born ugly. All these things are due to the karmic reactions that we're getting from previous activities. And it's due to mistakes also we're making in this life, due to a rebellious nature. Okay, now, when you say material nature is under the control of Krishna, of course, right? However, a car that you buy is made by, let's say, GM. So they know every part. You have books that explain every part. There might be 200,000 parts in that car. Right? They know every part, 20,000 parts. They know every part. They have books explaining it with numbers, exact numbers and everything. But if you misuse the car causes you misery. Right? Let's say you don't repair the brakes, and then all of a sudden you're speeding, you put on the brakes, they don't work, you crash. Now, is that the fault of GM? Not really, unless they made defective parts. If the parts are not defective, but you use them, and you continued using them, you know, in violation of the instructions they give in their books, then it's your fault. It's all produced, all the effects are produced by the car. But we misused the car. So whatever happened to us is directly our fault, but it happened due to misusing the car. So it's produced, the effect is produced by the car, but we were the actual cause of it, not Krishna. See? Someone would say, well, the material energy only acts under the order of Krishna. Therefore, if I crashed, it's Krishna's fault. No. You crashed because you didn't keep the upkeep of the car. Yeah, the car is produced by Krishna's energy, but you didn't follow the instructions on how to use it properly, and the car caused you to have an accident. You put your foot on the brake, and the brake didn't work. So this is hard to understand. People say, well, God is controlling everything. Whatever happens is his fault. No. Whatever happens is due to mistakes that we make because of ignorance. And we don't know how to relate properly to the material energy. Yeah, the material energy is functioning under the laws established by Krishna, but if we ignore those laws, just like, let's say someone comes from India, and in India, in his culture, let's say, men beat women, and there's nobody, police don't say anything, nobody says anything. So he comes to America, and he gets married, and he beats up some woman, his wife. Because that's what he does, that's what they do in India. But in America, he's arrested and put into the penal system, and he goes through a lot of severe trouble, whether his wife presses charges or not, because the laws are different in America than in India. See, right now they're trying to change the laws in India that if women get beat up or abused, and they're going to pursue the people like they pursue them here. But right now it's not a fact. But here, they changed the laws here, so that if you hit a child or a woman, even though you're the parent, you get put in jail automatically. It doesn't matter whether the wife or the child press charges. Now, can he say that it's the fault of American society? No. There are laws. And, why did he come here if he's not going to follow the laws? Every country has its own laws. It's his own fault. But if you say, well, no, that's not fair. Like in my country, we can beat people up all the time and nothing ever happens. Well, okay, then go back and live in your country. But you're here. Here, the laws are different. Just like people drive on the left-hand side in India, and here we drive on the right-hand side. If you come here and drive on the left-hand side, they'll arrest you. See? So you can't say, well, no, man, in my country you drive on this side. Okay, fine, but you're not in your country. You're under arrest. So we can't blame Krishna, even though material nature is the cause of transformations. Or material nature and the modes of matter are products of material nature. Because of that, but still we can't blame Krishna who's controlling it. We can only blame ourselves for acting in ignorance. Now the next verse is very important. Karya karana kartritve, hetu prakritiruchyate, purusha sukadukana bhoktritve hetur uchyate. Nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. Wow, nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, but the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. What does this mean? The different manifestations of body and senses among the living entities are due to material nature. There are 8,400,000 different species of life, and these varieties are creations of the material nature. They arise from the different sensual pleasures of the living entity, who thus desires to live in this body or that. When he is put into different bodies, he enjoys different kinds of happiness and distress. His material happiness and distress are due to his body, and not to himself as he is. In his original state, there is no doubt of enjoyment. Therefore, that is his real state. Because of the desire to lord it over material nature, he is in the material world. In the spiritual world, there is no such thing. The spiritual world is pure, but in the material world, everyone is struggling hard to acquire different kinds of pleasures for the body. It might be more clear to state that this body is the effect of the senses. The senses are instruments for this body, for gratifying desire. Now the sum total, body and instrument senses, are offered by material nature, as will be clear in the next verse. The living entity is blessed or damned with circumstances according to his past desire and activity. According to one's desires and activities, material nature places one in various residential quarters. The being himself is the cause of his attaining such residential quarters, and his attendant enjoyment or suffering. Once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature because the body, being matter, acts according to the laws of nature. So we've given this example before. Let's say you want to go to India, so you go and buy a ticket. Then you go to the airport, and you go through immigration, you go through security and immigration and everything. Then you wait. Then you board the plane. As soon as you get on the plane, whatever happens to that plane happens to you. If the plane goes down, you go down with it. So the same thing. Due to our desire and activities in previous lives, we get a certain type of body with a certain set of senses. Now, once you're placed in that body with those type of senses, And the senses are limited to different degrees, right? The senses of an ant are different than the senses of a human being. Therefore, the human being has more ways of protecting himself from calamity than an ant. So whatever body you get, there's a certain destiny with that body that you can't escape. You can try whatever you want, you can't escape it. So once placed in some particular kind of body, he comes under the control of nature, because the body, being matter, acts according to the laws of nature. The airplane, if it's properly maintained, might get you to your destination. And if it's not properly maintained, it might crash. The airplane, if it has a bomb on it, even though it's properly maintained, if the bomb blows up, it'll crash. The airplane, if the pilot makes a mistake flying the airplane, it'll crash, even though it functions perfectly. You see? So whether it's the pilot, the airplane itself, or the weather, or whatever, you go down with the airplane. So as soon as he is put into the body of a dog, he must act like a dog. He cannot act otherwise. And if the living entity is put into the body of a hog, then he is forced to eat stool and act like a hog. Similarly, if the living entity is put into the body of a demigod, he must act according to his body. This is the law of nature. But in all circumstances, the supersoul is with the individual soul. That is explained in the Vedas, Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.1, as follows: Dwa Suparna Sayujya Sakaya. The Supreme Lord is so kind upon the living entity that he always accompanies the individual soul, and in all circumstances is present as a supersoul or Paramatma. And the next verse, which is extremely important, Purushasa Parakparta, Bhukte Pakritijan Gunai, Karanam Gunasangasya Sadasadyuni Janmasu. The living entity of material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. This verse is very important for understanding how the living entities transmigrate from one body to another. It is explained in the second chapter that the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another, just as one changes dress. This change of dress is due to his attachment to material existence. As long as he is captivated by this false manifestation, he has to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is put into such undesirable circumstances. Under the influence of material desire, the entity is born sometimes as a demigod, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a beast, as a bird, as a worm, and as an aquatic, as a saintly man, and as a bug. This is going on, and in all cases, the living entity thinks himself to be the master of his circumstances, yet he is under the influence of material nature. How he is put into such different bodies is explained here. It is due to association with the different modes of nature. One has to rise, therefore, above the three material modes and become situated in a transcendental position. That is called Krishna consciousness. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another, because he has material desires since time immemorial. But he has to change that conception. That change can be effected only by hearing from authoritative sources. The best example is here. Arjuna is hearing the science of God from Krishna, the living entity. If he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature, and gradually and proportionately, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. In a Vedic mantra it is said that as he becomes learned in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he proportionately relishes his eternal blissful life. So here is the real explanation right here. So the kings that were imprisoned by Jarasandha, they say, we are no longer interested in sense gratification or the false happiness derived through the material body. By your grace, we have now come to the conclusion that hankering after such material happiness is just like searching for water in a desert mirage. We are no longer interested in the results of our pious activities, such as performing great sacrifices to be elevated to the heavenly planets. We now understand that such elevation to a higher material standard may sound very relishable, but actually there cannot be any happiness within this material world. We pray for your Lordship to favor us by instructing us how to engage in the transcendental loving service of your lotus feet, so that we may never forget our eternal relationship with your Lordship. We do not want liberation from the entanglement of material existence. By your will, we may take birth in any species of life. It does not matter. We simply pray that we never forget your lotus feet under any circumstances. Dear Lord, we now surrender unto your lotus feet by offering our respectful obeisances unto you, because you are the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, Krishna, the son of Vasudeva. You are the super soul in everyone's heart, and you are Lord Hari, who can take away all miserable conditions of material existence. Dear Lord, your name is Govinda, the reservoir of all pleasure, because one who is engaged in satisfying your senses satisfies his own senses automatically. Dear Lord, you are ever famous, for you can put an end to all the miseries of your devotees. Please, therefore, accept us as your surrendered servants. Yeah, so we read this yesterday, but we're going over it again because it's extremely important. This is a realization of a person who's ready to be liberated from material existence, birth and death. They understand the solution to this problem, enigmatic problem of birth, old age, disease, and death. Daivihi esa gunamayi, mama maya duratyaya, mam evaye prapanyante, maya metam tarantite. It's impossible to overcome the material nature. You can follow anybody you want, Obama or whatever. It's not going to lead you out of this entanglement. But one who surrenders to Krishna, rather than surrendering to Obama, we should surrender to Krishna. Then you can get out. How? Well, it was explained here that we consider our position your causeless mercy, unalloyed mercy upon us, because now we can understand that we were falsely proud, and that our material opulences could be withdrawn from us within a second by your will. By your causeless mercy only, we are now able to think of your lotus feet. This is our greatest gain. Dear Lord, everyone knows that the body is a breeding ground of diseases. Now we are aged, and instead of being proud of our bodily strength, we are getting weaker day by day. We are no longer interested in sense gratification or the false happiness derived through the material body. By your grace, we have now come to the conclusion that hankering after such material happiness is just like searching for water in a desert mirage. We are no longer interested in the results of our pious activities, such as performing great sacrifices to be elevated to the heavenly planets. We now understand that such elevation to a higher material standard may sound very relishable, but actually there cannot be any happiness within this material world. Shri Radha Nilamadhava Ki Jai. So these are mature realizations of devotees. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another, because he has material desires since time immemorial. But he has to change that conception. That change can be effected only by hearing from authoritative sources. The best example is here. Arjuna is hearing the science of God from Krishna. The living entity, if he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature. And gradually and proportionately, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. In a Vedic mantra it is said that he becomes learned in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that as he becomes learned in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he proportionately relishes his eternal blissful life. So this hearing process, that's what we're doing now. We're hearing. I'm hearing also. I'm reading and I'm hearing Prabhupada's words. This is what can affect the change from desiring material sense gratification to desiring to please Krishna. Otherwise, we're going to stay in this world birth after birth. No way to get out. So, Krishna hears the prayers of these imprisoned men, the kings. So Krishna takes care of all of them. After delivering his instructions to the kings and princes, Lord Krishna immediately arranged for their comfort and asked many servants and maidservants to take care of them. Lord Krishna requested Sahadev, the son of King Jarasandha, to supply all necessities to the kings and show them all respect and honor. Well, he just killed his father, right? But the boy is completely surrendered to Krishna. He's not upset with Krishna. In pursuance of the order of Lord Krishna, Sahadev offered them all honor and presented them with ornaments, garments, garlands, and other paraphernalia. Yeah, Krishna established Sahadev, the son of Jarasandha, as the king of Jarasandha's kingdom. He didn't kill Jarasandha to take the kingdom over himself. After taking their baths and dressing very nicely, the kings appeared happy and gentle. Then they were supplied nice food. Lord Krishna supplied everything for their comfort, as befitting their royal positions. Since the kings were so mercifully treated by Lord Krishna, they felt great happiness, and their bright faces appeared just like the stars in the sky after the end of the rainy season. All nicely dressed and ornamented, their earrings glittering, they were then seated on chariots bedecked with gold and jewels and drawn by decorated horses. After saying that each was taken care of, Lord Krishna, in a sweet voice, asked them to return to their respective kingdoms. By his liberal behavior, unparalleled in the history of the world, Lord Krishna released all the kings who had been in the clutches of Jarasandha, and the kings, being fully satisfied, began to chant his holy name, thinking of his holy form and glorifying his transcendental pastimes as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus engaged, they returned to their respective kingdoms. The citizens of their kingdoms were greatly pleased to see them return, and when they heard of the kind dealings of Lord Krishna, they were all very happy. The kings began to manage the affairs of their kingdoms in accordance with the instructions of Lord Krishna, and all those kings and their subjects passed their days very happily. This is a vivid example of a Krishna-conscious society. If the people of the world, taking into account their respective material qualities, divide the whole society into 4 orders for material progress and 4 orders for spiritual progress, centering these orders on Krishna and following the instructions of Krishna as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, the entire human society will undoubtedly be happy. This is the lesson we have to take from this incident. Well, this is our mission of Krishna consciousness, stated right here. We want to make people happy by helping organize society to make spiritual and material progress for pleasing Krishna. After thus causing the annihilation of Jarasandha by Bhimasena, and after being properly honored by Sahadeva, the son of Jarasandha, Lord Krishna, accompanied by Bhimasena and Arjuna, returned to the city of Hastinapura. When they reached the precincts of Hastinapura, they blew their respective conch shells, and by hearing the sound vibrations and understanding who was arriving, everyone immediately became cheerful. But the enemies of Krishna, upon hearing the conch shells, were very sorry. The citizens of Indraprastha felt their hearts become joyful simply by hearing the vibration of Krishna's conch shell, because they could understand that Jarasandha had been killed. Now the performance of the Raja Surya sacrifice by King Yudhisthira was almost certain. Bhivasena, Arjuna, and Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, arrived before King Yudhisthira and offered their respects to the king. King Yudhisthira attentively heard the narration of the killing of Jarasandha and the setting free of the kings. He also heard of the tactics adopted by Krishna to kill Jarasandha. The king was naturally affectionate toward Krishna, but after hearing the story, he became even more bound to him in love. Tears of ecstasy glided from his eyes, and he was so stunned that he was almost unable to speak. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 73rd chapter of Krishna, where Krishna returns to the city of Hastinapura. Jai Shri Radha Leela Madhava ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So tomorrow we're going to read the deliverance of Sisupala. Are there any questions? Yeah. Yes.
Now, when the person gets liberated, the false ego will not be there, but what happened to mind and intelligence? Will that also still be there when the person is liberated, goes to the
They become purified.
But those three coverings are still there?
They become purified. They become, see, everything material is spiritual. But you don't see its spiritual quality as long as it's used for sense gratification. You use the same things in Krishna's service, they become purified. This is explained in the 4th chapter. (24th verse). Strong. Okay, so this verse says, a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. So anyway, we won't read the whole thing, but let's just look. This is one long paragraph, but let's look somewhat in the middle of the paragraph. It says, the Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahmajyoti. His spiritual effulgence, everything that exists is situated in that Brahmajyoti. But when the Jyoti is covered by illusion, or Maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor, and the result are all combined together, Brahman, or the Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth covered by Maya, and Maya means sense gratification, is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the Absolute Truth, regains a spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the Absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the Absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. So, Maya, or sense gratification, covers the Jyoti, the spiritual light on which everything is situated. And you don't see its spiritual aspect. That Maya is in the mind of the living entity. But you purify the Maya the desire for sense gratification and domination. And 2, serving Krishna, pleasing the Lord, using everything in the service of the Lord for his pleasure, then its spiritual nature becomes revealed. Your mind becomes spiritual, your intelligence becomes spiritual, your body becomes spiritual. Everything becomes spiritual. So the absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Matter, dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth, regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. So, Maya is existing in the mind. In the mind, we have this false concept that we're meant for sense gratification. We're meant for dominating and enjoying this material world and gathering sense gratification for our body. That's Maya. It's existing here. You purified it here. You don't see Maya anymore. You see Krishna's presence. But as long as that state of Maya is in the mind, of wanting to dominate and enjoy, just like people have all these desires, right? And I'll tell a story about an uncle of mine. He had a dry cleaning shop. Right? Now, dry cleaning, they bring clothes in, and usually they send the clothes to a plant, dry cleaning plant. In the plant, they use chemicals. They dip the clothing in these chemicals. They take it out. The chemicals evaporate, and they send it back. It's clean. They don't. I mean, the suits that people have, they're made out of wool. They don't wear so many suits anymore. They used to wear all these heavy wool suits and heavy cloth suits. It's very difficult to wash them. You don't wash them in a washing machine. You have to dry clean them. Dry cleaning means you don't use water, you use these chemicals. You dip it, and it comes out. The chemicals are highly toxic. Well, my uncle, he had a tailor shop and a dry cleaning shop. So they would drop the clothing off with him, and then he would send it to a dry cleaning plant, and the dry cleaning plant would bring it back. So he decided we're not making enough money. So he found out what the chemicals were. He set the chemicals up in the back room of his tailor shop, right? And he was dipping in the back room to make a few extra dollars. In a short period of time, he died of cancer and his wife died of cancer. Both of them died in a very short time. Maybe 2 years after he started dipping, they both died. Because they're highly toxic chemicals. Just to make a few extra dollars. See, he didn't realize how dangerous those chemicals were. He was handling them all the time. He's dead. Cancer. You see? Just to make a few dollars for what? What was he going to use the money? For sense gratification. It's called Maya. Based on ignorance. So, we can correct that by hearing regularly this Bhagavad Gita in the association of devotee, discussing it, thinking about it, and chanting, and taking prasada, and doing service. We can correct that mentality. Otherwise, it's impossible. How can you correct something so subtle as an illusory thought? Very, very difficult. Unless you can see the fault in it. But you won't see the fault right away because we've been conditioned many, many lifetimes. It takes long period of submissive and serious hearing and chanting to correct this mentality. Okay? So the mind becomes purified, the intelligence becomes purified. Everything that we think is material is actually spiritual. But when it's used for sense gratification, we don't see its spiritual nature. We only see material things. Haribol. His uncle that died, he was a very nice man. I liked him very much.